something along those lines, and you can trick it. Maybe I could tempt the demo gods, we could see, but I might as well go ahead and get started for our presentation. So, afternoon, everybody. We're trying a different time, a little later in the afternoon rather than our just before lunch kickoff. It's summertime. We figure this is a great time to experiment here in July. And while AI is still the hot darling topic for a lot of technology, and fear not, there'll be more conversations around it as more things evolve and come out and change. And we put out the good word for what folks should be paying attention to. We wanted to come back to basics here at the dog days of July for, yeah, security is still important. Just because there's AI to focus on and get productive about doesn't mean that, while we go on vacation, we shouldn't keep the same degree of vigilance. And I even argue the opposite is the vigilance has to increase now to be able to meet what it is that we're seeing. So what we're going over today, phishing is still the number one attack vendor. Overwhelmingly, it's still the number one way somebody gets into the company. What has changed out there because of AI? How has AI affected the phishing email landscape? What does social engineering these days look like beyond the trick? I mean, I even doing webinars a couple of years ago, looking through like what's changed, what's still there, what do attacks look like today? And then how do you build that resilient organization, take some practical steps along the way to make sure that you're safe? And the nice part too is a lot of these, there are certain automated business tools that you can use that really help a company, but being able to have that trust but verify ethos and taking the time to learn how to spot a phishing email is just good education, especially for just helping a lot of folks everywhere from, I mean, everybody can fall for a phishing email. It is completely independent demographic. So we're doing a decent job of winning the tech war. Firewalls are getting a lot better. Email filtering, speaking of the AI pieces, is now doing a lot. Protections are getting better and smarter, and the Sentinel-1 advertised machine learning a long time ago. And, more MFA, the insurance companies have gone on the rampage for MFA on everything, and we've rolled it out, and it's a good idea for preventing people from just guessing your password. But stuff's still happening. There are still ransomware attacks. There are still email compromises, but, at the core level is that humans still make final decisions and can still provide permissions and ways in and can answer things. And so while we have these fantastic whiz bang technologies, the people are still losing the war. I mean, great example is I got a client that deals with general public, and they have relatively new, so it's not strictly business to business, it's mostly business to business, but obviously they have, employees, so there's a lot of personal email addresses and things like that. And this poor new employee gets an email from what she thinks is the boss, and it was within her first couple of days, so she hadn't had a chance to do the Huntress training or anything like that yet, and she fell for the gift card scam. The classic, hi, it's me, Bob, the CEO of the company. I need you to go get gift cards for the team. And they spray and pray these things, especially, maybe you updated your LinkedIn to say that you were at a new place, and just, the tools are out there to be able to comb this information and keep it going. So she fell for it. She went out, bought the gift cards, punched them in, and she was out $200. So not good. And then and then now she's extra vigilant. We keep getting forwarded all the spam attempts, but
Hmm.
man, you fall for it once, they now know that, hey, there's a chance you may do it again. So they just keep sending more. So she's the number one spam reporter in the organization now, but yeah, it comes through a pretty hard way of doing it. So there, as we think about for, how as attackers go after these poor employees, there's an acronym that we have that we try to not use in front of clients called PEPCAC, problem between keyboard and chair. There's a lot of little jokes for that type of stuff, but sometimes it's a really innocent crossing of wires. Somebody calls in, says they've reset the computer, but we see that it's still been online for 2 years or 2 months rather. Somebody may say, we got one today that somebody was saying a power cord from the wall was plugging into the dock, some wires crossed, pun intended, on a docking station. But sometimes it's just somebody is an expert in what they do. They're fantastic at accounting. They're fantastic at law. They're fantastic at plumbing. And the tech is just a realm that it's why we're here. And they just don't have that fluency. So that human factor is always there. And I think something that hackers really take advantage of overwhelmingly is using things that sound just close enough to be able to get some type of action. Because sometimes just getting the email won't kick it off. But as soon as the human takes a form of action, usually a click, a reply, something along that, that's where it moves to that next level. So what the toolkit, I could talk about all the geeky stuff, but really what they're using at a social engineering level is first and foremost urgency. So, hey, this is the CEO. I need these gift cards to be able to give to a client in the next 15 minutes. High sense of urgency, not enough time to stop, think, review. Is Bob really going to ask me for gift cards? Like, why doesn't he do it himself? And like, why does he need gift cards for clients? There's also the authority using, we see this all the time I'm sure everybody in here has bumped into that pop-up of you go to a website and it's not because you went to a nasty website. I have seen this on Blue Cross Blue Shield more times than I care to count. That you go to a website, you get the pop-up, it says, this is Microsoft. Your computer's compromised, call this number. So they're using the authority of being Microsoft to impersonate it. That same pop-up, there's the fear in it. Hey, you're compromised, something is wrong, you got to do something right away. There's also the curiosity. I mean, this one was a little bit older. Hey, there's the classic Nigerian prince scam, right? There's $2 million of gold and I'm trying to get it out of the country. Help me, and I'll give you that. And then the last piece is just, greed. Maybe there is something for, hey, if you do this, you can get paid more or something. Overwhelmingly, the parts I see that are more successful are to the left of the toolkit rather than to the right. I see way more there's an urgent request from a piece of authority to do something, and that's how they get somebody to make some form of take some form of action to compromise the email and go from there. And the sea of slop, AI has made it that generating the different value and the pieces instead of, English as a second language becoming a problem, and other things. I know one of the hunters trainings they had recently was, the idea that for ChatGPT, you can trick the training data if you put stuff up on the internet. So if you change the phone number for a support desk in enough different places, you can get ChatGPT to offer up the wrong phone number. So that, there are still hallucinations that come from the AI tools. So there's that, where you're getting your information from. Is it a true source of truth? So, it's even in that trust but verify piece, is it the right phone number? Is it the wrong phone number? There's still some, questions around that. But also too, the AI makes it so much easier to disguise the ship. It's not as pirate flag is not as obvious anymore. I mentioned broken English for English as a second language, maybe the formatting of an email, maybe the format of a website for where you go to log in. It's the technology tools make it so that the pieces of it are incredibly convincing. Another great one is, I had this for a client today, as a matter of fact, that had an issue for their website where it had a Cloudflare click to make sure that you say you are who click to say you're not a robot, and then you'd click it and it would try and get you to run a command in your PowerShell terminal. And all that looked, perfect for, it looked legit while we were going through it. So just the AI is really making it so much easier for the criminals to do that front end portion to it. Crafting the phishing email, crafting text messages, and being able to set the system up. QR codes. This is a really interesting one. During the Super Bowl, there was an ad for just putting a QR code up on the screen and didn't really have too much else on the ad. And millions of people took their phone out and, and scanned the code. So with a QR code, you could very easily just take up you could have a QR code on a website. You could even, I mean, hell, I mean, especially too after post-COVID, you've got, you go to a restaurant, they don't want to give you a menu. They put a little QR code on the table to say, scan this for your menu. I mean, were I a terrible person, I'd 100% do that through Boston. That'd be incredible. I'd make a lot of money. Thank God I'm honest. And then especially too, the creepier parts, voice cloning and deep fake video. I mean, I'm sure you may have seen AI Will on YouTube, and that's through HeyGen. We've talked about it a little bit with opportunities in marketing for what you get to use there, but
Mm.
it can do an incredible job and it can do it almost in real time for being able to answer back and forth. So that quote unquote phone call from the CEO might sound exactly like them. It's definitely a very brave new world. And then especially too the ability to fake things, chatbots being able to impersonate emails, especially, the if they have enough evidence to train a model to sound just enough like somebody, they could probably get the cadence for it. And it might not be that somebody is in your system. It could be that they picked it up because they were in, you were dealing with I pick on a plumbing company, I don't mean to, but your plumber who's an honest, hardworking guy. He does everything out of a Gmail account, but he clicked on a bad invoice a while back, and somebody's been sitting in his Gmail for a while. And you've given this plumber a lot of work at a bunch of different clients you've had. So now that plumber has been able to see, now the attacker sees the plumber's upstream person and goes, oh, there's a bigger fish up there, and figures out that strategy. That's Criminals run a business, and in running the business, they have to figure out leads. And the way they figure out leads is, rather than getting you to honestly say yes to you cutting them a check, they sit there and go, how can I take a check from them? So tons of different ways to do it. It's, I mean, there are and especially phishing. I mean, this really should be nothing different. I mean, looking at, here is to your personal Gmail account, security at support.notice. Maybe that just comes through enough, but you just see urgent account update, unusual activity, precaution, restricted access, permanent suspension, link to expire. So, here's the urgency, 2 hours, reset the password link is the action, authority by coming from support.notice, account security team, very classic phishing email style. Maybe there's something, here's another one, spear phishing, very targeted, very built in to your Gmail personal account from the HR department. If you're not looking at the from address, you look really quick. It could be review attached document outlining 5 p.m. today, attachment or access directly, failure to sign. So there's that urgency, the authority again. Just again, very targeted. It could be timed nicely with something else that somebody has set up for, LinkedIn announcement or another social media announcement. And then I'm sure we've all gotten this text message for easy pass. Your account is low. Pay the toll. It's another one. And I mean, here is, the hey, oh yeah, toll roll. And it's exactly that one. So I'm sure we've all seen the text one. And then now the new one, phishing. I mean, I like how everything has to be ishing for phishing,
Mm.
but the voicemail portion is a great example for the voice cloning portions. When we did the HeyGen avatars, when you go to first train the model, and HeyGen has a good control for whatever model is going to do the voice, HeyGen generates a very specific script that the voice has to read in order to say, yep, yep, that is actually Will doing doing the call. And, it has you say a couple random things as you go for I authorize you read out a little bit of the terms of agreement and then say some random things, but the voice cadence all Ryan really has to do now for a lot of our video editing is punch the script in, and it has my voice pretty well. Even the occasional Southern twang comes out, which, I mean, if you get me around my buddies from NC State, it comes out a little bit despite my, Massachusetts roots. So the tools are definitely out there, and it can come from a recording. So, I mean, if your voice is out there in some form of recording for something, YouTube video or whatever, I know I'm putting ammo in the gun here, but it is easy for nefarious people to be able to build the voice model. So let's go ahead and dive in for a lot of these really specific, you know, social engineering red flags. And again, these came from out in the wild. It's not too hard. So, there's one introducing somebody for, hey, we have a job offer, contact, there's some urgent tone, great offer for too good to be true. Now, this is really more aimed for on like a personal level rather than, the business to business portions. But again, I wanted to put something that was a little more personal because I wanted folks to take this for not only learning to spot some of these things for business, but also being able to help friends and family for putting the good word out. And taking it, so, hey, this is coming in through iMessage, but it wants you to move to WhatsApp. So that's a huge indicator that when they want you to go somewhere else, that starts to, you know, starts to raise some red flags. So those text message ones, but I'm sure, I mean, people are usually pretty good of just the, hey, unsolicited text messages, get out of here. Thank goodness. That's a good one. But again, too, sometimes the getting that unsolicited text message and someone says, hi, it's Will. I'm texting you from a different number because my phone broke, but I need you to do this. Again, that urgency, authority portion. Just again, if you have that gut feeling that something's off, just raise the red flag. Go. There's a reason we give out the mouse pads with the phone numbers. So that way you have the authoritative phone number for who to call and text. So it's always a good place of just trust but verify if anything ever feels off, especially for phishing email. The dead first place to check is just that from. What's funny using the support-notice.com is I'm pretty sure that's one of the ones that comes from Huntress, like account dash notification or something. And there's spelling errors are really going to be a thing of the past, I think. The prompt attention to this matter. I mean, as we were talking about AI tools, you are not really going to see that as much anymore. Generic greetings, not as much anymore, but suspicious attachments, email addresses from something you don't recognize, and then those urgent, something urging you to take action to click on something that you weren't expecting or anticipating is really those are the dead giveaways. And then again, for the business email compromise, the idea is that if they get a business email, and then even worse, if that user's account has admin creds, so if there's a lot of business owners who might have that global administrator or billing administrator right on their email. So, the email they use every day, will@systemsport.com, they have admin rights on it, and then they click that nasty email, and then when the attacker gets access to the email, they're then able to do all the admin things with that account. I mean, I remember seeing there was a firm that was having issues where they were saying, like, our emails aren't getting delivered and I'm not seeing emails and we're just having a lot of problems. What do you use? Like, do you use like a weird third party? Like, are you using some goofy email.me? I said, no, Microsoft 365. I said, oh, that's weird. So go and check out their Microsoft and their account. So I still don't know how I was able to log in under the admin account because their licenses were suspended for fraudulent activity suspicion. And when we started looking at the invoices and what was listed in their accounts is an attacker had compromised one of their emails and then went in and bought 15 domains and made like legitimate sounding, Acme Corporation, the blah, blah, blah group, and then was making SharePoint sites and accounts under those domains and was using this poor firm's, Microsoft email account to just launch all their bases from because one of the principals at the firm who had the global admin rights, had clicked on something they weren't supposed to, and the attacker just sat in there and there was nothing there to catch it. So, so when someone gets into that business email and they're just looking for that one click, even with multi-factor, you have the one click. There's a thing called token theft. So and it's one of those, you come up with one system that fixes stuff, you move on to the next. Now, what MFA does solve is that there used to just be spray and pray, where someone would know that Will uses Microsoft 365, and I'm going to take a bunch of passwords from, you know, the dark web, that Adobe was compromised and LinkedIn was compromised, and this one random concert ticket website was compromised, and I'm going to try passwords that he had there and just spray and pray and see what happens. And because most folks would reuse passwords, boom, spray and pray would work, and you just get into the email account and away you go. So multi-factor prevents that spray and pray, which is really nice. But the way it evolved was that now you need token theft. So when you log in for MFA, so that you don't have to punch that two-factor code in every single time you try to do something on the web, they drop a little token in the browser that says, hey, I authenticated and I'm good to go for a certain period of time. Makes life easy, but the issue with it is if you have that token, somebody else could bypass the MFA because the token is the, hey, I am who I say I am, let me in. So that's where our monitoring portions of like Huntress ITDR comes in, identity threat detection and response. And hey, we see that this person is in Boston, and all of a sudden they've got to log in Nevada. That's impossible travel. We think they're compromised. Let's lock them out and take it from there. So some of this too, as we've talked about for some of the spray and pray password guesses, and as we've talked about some of this, the voice impersonation, the deep fakes, just being careful about what you share and any public form of page still is out there. It's pet names, schools you attended, birthdays. Still, some stuff can start to paint the picture of, that whole, it can give somebody a little bit too much information about you. And then especially with the AI tools, you'd be surprised what little effort someone has to put in to learn that about you. I mean, I remember when some of the ChatGPT deep research pieces first came up, there was somebody in a industry group with me that said, "Oh, I've got a prospect with this firm coming up, and I want to do research on the principal of the firm," and just put the principal's name in there and said, "I have this. What are like ways to, like, using this sales process? What are ways I can make a personal connection?" And it found what charities the principal had donated to. It found sports leagues that the kids were involved in. And then the AI, and this was just ChatGPT deep research, nothing nefarious. It was just gave it a name and enough information and location and context, and ChatGPT burned a few bathtubs worth of water to be able to give a 5-page personality profile report on this person. So it's just worth it for just being careful out there. And then especially too, again, somebody's asking you to do something, use the phone number, the contact methods that you trust. That's, again, shameless plug for, I mean, actually, I should not hold up my mouse pad. That's disgusting, but that's because I haven't changed mine in like 4 years, but so it goes. But I've talked a little bit about the sharing portions and the deep fakes and the clones. So I don't know if so there's a few links to some YouTube shorts, and I'm happy to pass these off to folks. But fun fact, none of these are actually me. I mean, I'm me right now talking for the Zoom portion, but all the ones there are I mean, the crazy one is the one in the middle. That is my office. I mean, it's, if I unblur it, that part right there is my degree, and that corner right there is that same degree. So, and then a couple generic backgrounds there for being able to check stuff. But again, you use that training data and you can create dang good impersonations. I remember my wife asking, like, "What? You've really started putting out a lot of video content." And I went, "Not me. Say I will."
Yeah. Even all the different shirts, I'm like, go.
Yeah, this is kind of nice. I do want that polo on the left.
Yeah.
Polo on the left looks like it's really comfortable. Not so sure about the green shirt in the middle. That looks a little darker tone for me. I like the light blue ones, but anyways. But What I really want to hammer home, besides the creepiness factor, is just it's very easy to do. Meaning that if there are certain processes in the business that have major impact, public announcements, financial transactions, client communications, especially for client account management, it should have some friction and it should have appropriate friction. I'm not saying that it should be impossible, but it should have enough multiple steps for approval and time for review and time for somebody to raise their hand and say, I'm not sure about this. Now, granted, the type of businesses we talk with, I mean, how often do you need to send $40,000 within a 5-minute window? Luckily, nobody I'm really talking to on here is day trading or, doing something where, hey, we do have to, we do have to move that much money in milliseconds. But for the rest of us, there should be an appropriate degree of pause making those really big jumps. Oh, it's gonna play through them. Cool.
The perils of
I am going to. I'm almost certain the audio didn't come through for it, but
yeah, the audio doesn't, I don't think, comes in on that.
so I'll skip right through just to the next slide. But happy to send the slides out or a link to our YouTube channel if you do want to see at least a couple of the examples in action. But small businesses are especially vulnerable in this world, especially, I'm talking about a lot of these crazy tools. The idea of, being able to check this. We wear a lot of hats and, you know, they're ripe targets because somebody can just make a couple bucks, move on to the next one, or start to get access to maybe the small business has a bigger fish and using that leapfrog technique to get to the next piece. So a lot of small businesses, there's no internal expert. There's not the person around the corner that says, oh, that's our tech guy. We're going to go ask him. Or maybe you have somebody in the office that is good with tech, but it's not their full-time job. And just you get them on a bad day. Got a deadline for the normal thing that they do, and you ask them about a suspicious email, and they're like, my brain is fried. The toddler's not sleeping, and I'm not going to make a good decision here. Sometimes there's that lack of oversight too. Maybe there isn't a Huntress system that's watching the logins and looking for if something is suspicious. I went with that too many hats. See previous joke about person's the tech person, although I like that top hat look. Person's the tech person. The person's also trying to do their normal job of bookkeeping, and on top of it, they've got the family stuff at home, and it just all stacks up and it's too much. And especially if they got that deadline that, the high speed of the too much is you got to get it done fast. There's not as we all know in small business, there is no place to hide. And I also want to stress too, I know I've picked on employees clicking on things and, the human, I started the presentation with, conversation about, I started the presentation with the human, it's not about better tech. The humans are the weak link. Employees aren't the problem. It's not because they're bad at their job. They're just busy. They're productive. They're trying to get things done. They have lives and they might catch it 999 times out of 1,000. But the worst part is we have to be right every time, and the attacker just needs you to be wrong once. And it's not necessarily that the employee isn't the problem. It's really just the system. And it could be, do you have the appropriate email protections in place between advanced spam filtering and identity threat detection and response. You still have to have, the technical controls because just people have bad days. We're human. That's the part. It's AI is not going to replace us all ever. There's still a place for us at the table. And just again, technical controls, there's good things to put. The multi-factor authentication, the app on the phone, prevents that spray and pray. It's a good thing. The conditional access, some email systems are pretty easy to add to it. Microsoft 365 requires you to get a specific type of license, business premium, but then you can say things like, hey, you can only access you can only access from the United States. This person can only access from the Philippines. Hey, you can only access from compliant devices in Microsoft 365. There's a lot of cool things you can do for conditional access. And makes sense for some folks. And even with conditional access, you give up some convenience. Your machine crashes, you need to be able to get to something. You have a tough time making the jump. And then password managers, keeping the passwords in the browser is vulnerable. It's so easy to just dump them into a text file. It's my favorite magic trick to use for when we're working with a new prospect to show, what's going on. And then password managers too, I'm running into the other major benefit to it as well is that you've got someone, maybe a key employee leaves the firm. It happens. I've actually got this going on at another client site right now. Very small firm, person who's been there 25 years, finally heard the swan song for greener pastures. Wasn't a retirement, but was finding something with a shorter commute. And this particular employee had a lot of keys to the kingdom, and everything was written down in a book. And then with the rise, and then this person was also really good about making sure they had the multi-factor. And with making sure they had the multi-factor now, when that person left and only is helping 1 day a week for the transition, the firm's locked out of a lot of platforms. So the password manager can help with that key employee risk of, okay, this person has keys to the kingdom. We can set something up that makes it easier to transfer data around. And then for preventing the those business email compromises and those phishing attempts, you've got something that makes it a little harder to get that information. And just this is a question every business should ask, but I also say is something just anytime you are communicating in the digital space, you should really, ask the question, do you know who you're talking to? And I have no problem when I hire a new technician and the technician somebody calls in and says, I'm going to pick on Zach, the new account manager, and talks to Zach for the first time and goes, who the heck is Zach? And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should do a little bit more about, announcing that system support has a new employee. Maybe I shouldn't, because again, to that point of the story I told earlier about the poor new employee who got the gift card scam. So, you know, how do employees know who they're talking to? How do you know who you're talking to? Did a text message come in claiming to be somebody from a different number? And do you have a method of going back to the channel that you trust? Or is it not urgent enough that you ignore it and the next time you see them at the coffee shop, you go like, did you ask me about unsecured lines of credit? And then, how does somebody report a suspicious activity? Is it going somewhere? Does somebody review it? A lot of the clients have been fantastic about sending us stuff of like, I'm suspicious of this. And, you know, I have no problem with those emails because I would much rather have somebody be suspicious, ask for a second pair of eyes on it, than click something and have something go wrong. But other questions really nail down to, can someone impersonate the CEO or executives? Is it possible? How would somebody do it? Is maybe one of the executives travels a lot? Maybe they are pretty remote and maybe they post on social media or have done a lot of podcasts and it would be easy to make a voice impersonation of them. Who authorizes payments? What is when we do a payment authorization, how does that work? How are changes verified or charges? What are those financial controls? In Microsoft 365, I mean, my notes say, like, can someone hack our Microsoft 365? I would argue that you should take a step back and say, who are the global admins? What are the global admin accounts? And if you see one that is an active email account, like what we call a daily driver, you want to get that off of your email account and then make a dedicated one. We don't really take the tack that says like, hey, clients should not have global admin rights to Microsoft 365. They own it. If they need keys to it, that's fine. But what we typically do is when we take that admin right away, we create a dedicated admin account for them. And we usually call it something like admin first name. So like admin Will, admin Ryan. And then that way, that account holds those keys to the kingdom, but it's not something you're using every day. So there's there's not there's like no chance of token theft. There's like no chance of you're not getting an email to that account. It's kind of like you're a notary, and when you need to go do admin things, you open the drawer in your office and you take out your notary. This is a car key from an old car, but you take out the key to do the admin thing, and then when you're done, you put it back in the drawer and you close it and you go about your merry day. But, especially two of those questions to ask, how are compromises? if somebody does go, oh shoot, I clicked on it, how does that work? Do you have enough of a, you don't want to have a culture in your business too of saying that somebody clicks on something and then, mistakes are so poorly tolerated that folks don't feel comfortable raising their hands and saying I messed up. And then especially too, like, I mean, a lot of times too, when we see the compromises in Huntress, folks don't know that they did something. And that's fine. I mean, the attacker doesn't want you to know. They don't want you to raise the alarm. So, it's just making sure employees know how to raise their hand appropriately is always important. Yeah, it's a little word cloud for it. And then the last piece I leave with it is, this is my favorite phrase. I stole it from the NRC. I think it just makes so much sense here in IT as well. And it's just reasonable assurance of adequate protection. There's no such thing as removing all risk. Anybody who tells you that is a liar. And just every day we wake up, we're starting to accept risk that something may happen, and we mitigate it, we work with it, and we go through it. I mean, a great example of that risk mitigation is that conditional access part, right? You could go so far down that says I can only access my email from my office with my static IP from this, authorized machine. You could get conditional access in Microsoft 365 to that level. You could, but God forbid that machine has some type of problem. God forbid that the internet at the office goes down, and now you can't access your email from your phone. And now the only time you get to view email is just when you're in the office, which, I mean, now I think about it, that might be a much better way of like going back to a more elegant age of correspondence, but yeah, not the way we do business today, unfortunately. You could go down that path. You don't need to. You can take reasonable assurance that if the email comes through that has something nasty lurking in it, and it was at the right place at the right time with just enough of a similar name as somebody I was working with, and you clicked on it, that something's there to catch it. And that's a lot of why we have a job, frankly. So that reasonable assurance of adequate protection, that philosophy permeates everything that we do. And especially for phishing emails, it's you say that trust but verify for what's going on there. And then for the technical experts on our side, putting that reasonable assurance of adequate protection so that you have enough to be able to get the job done, but you are not totally locked down that you can't move. And that's about it. So with that, any questions from the people out there?
We've got anything, but I do think it's such a big topic. It often takes time to marinate. That's always evolving.
That's I mean, this is a classic. It was good. It was due for a refish, especially those fishing ones and the YouTube shorts for the being able to see, how easy it is to just make a little avatar.
Yeah, and that's the real simple way, because I know they also have a lot of like live service filter things where it's basically like you can motion capture it in real time, and that's the real pernicious thing.
The hits keep coming. Hits keep coming. But, well, excellent. Well, thank you everyone for taking time for hanging out with us today. Hope we got some value out of this. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, info@systemsport.com, or give us a ring, 781-837-0069. Those are the official numbers and emails. Speaking of our topics today, and have a fantastic summer, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.